A pleasure to meet all at last, and now here we are with some more of the Vlog-A-Thon 5.0. And just for the record, I plan on talking about the trips now. I initially wanted to do that in the last installment, but just couldn't. The outlooks of each and every single year have pretty much come and gone, so now, let's just say, I got that out of the way, and now we're going to focus specifically on what I have to talk about in terms of trips. As I've mentioned before, in 2018, 14 states I visited, including Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, Ohio, Georgia, Tennessee, Carolina, a good majority of which that happened to the east. But let's talk a bit about the likes of what happened here in 2022, because of course there were trips that happened in previous years. In 2019, I got to go to the state of Iowa twice, and that was pretty much it. But we did go to the state of Carolina again in 2020, followed by a road trip down to Indiana, and then of course, a trip down to Florida. But it wasn't in fact for Orlando like what we've usually done. Instead, it was for another location known as Fort Myers. Albeit it was a really nice place for what it was, but it's not always about shine and sparkle. 2020 had itself a lot of problems, but with all this stuff that I basically got to enjoy while the year came and went, it definitely helped to make it a much more pleasant experience for me. And I'm sure other people might have similar feelings. They can't just always start saying, it's the worst year ever, because it's not at all true, actually. I've given a lot of evidence as to why 2020 actually was a good year, how it really is. Criticizing about individual people's hardships on how the year turned out for them is one thing, but for them to simply blurt out those famous last words of any year that could ever possibly come by, this is the worst year of my life, or this is the worst year ever, or this is the worst year that ever existed. 2020 may have been a dumpster fire, but maybe check out what happened in 2021. It is, in fact, as some people have called, a garbage meteor. I could never find anything more accurate than that, because it just goes a little over the top, but that simply is what really depicts the overall nature of such a bad year like 2021. So, you really thought that a good majority of years, like the years of 2013, 2017, 2001, and 2008 were bad? Well, take a look at 2021. Such a horrible year that was. Beyond terrible. Especially in my life, when things should have taken a turnaround for the better. Instead, I lost some good jobs that I had. I lost credits. I've lost my initial home. I've even tried to move out at some point, but completely failed. So, it did not turn out the way it should have been. And the end of the year simply only made me realize that the next year had to have been good. And that is where we're at now. 2022, this is in fact a huge redemption in our lives. I've not only gotten better at getting my finances completely under control, even in the midst of some economic collapse that has happened, but hey, things have been building back up to a reasonable spot in our lives, and so by the end of this year, we'll most likely be back to where we had originally started before a lot of this nightmare had pretty much happened. The nightmare that happened on the other side of the world, in Ukraine. But now that we're basically dishing out money to help as many lives as possible, I'm beyond excited to see what could happen. A huge turnaround of things are bound to set place by the end of 2023. And so it could be a point where we're actually right back to where we started pre-NCOV 2019-2022. So any times that happened pre-2019 will most likely be coming back in the next 3 to 4 years. And I'm beyond excited to see where we could possibly be at when that does, in fact, happen. So, of course, 2021 was a point where I had trips, but it was only twice. In Carolina, and my official move out to Oregon should have officially been known as just a move to the state of Oregon, but it kind of failed. So whether you want to call that a trip or not, that barely even lasted a month, is up to you. I more or less would just simply call it a long-running tour of the place with some training in terms of getting myself a good living established, as well as being able to control my own personal finances. I've had a lot of training from accountants and some other people who are financial experts in that field, so of course I would actually be prepared for this sort of thing. I took a train there, took whatever stuff I could, and simply went out to the state of Oregon. Moved out there, lived there for a little while, tried to find a nice job, but in the end, it turned out to flop. So of course, had to move all the way back here to Wisconsin. It really did not work out the way it should have. But you know what? I am more than just happy for how things have turned around here. The trips in 2022 are a completely different magnitude. 2 trips out to Carolina to see my younger brother, Luke Nowak, and then of course, followed along by a nice road trip out to places including Gladstone, Michigan, and even to Wisconsin Dells. The first time that's ever happened in years. I had not been to Wisconsin Dells in a long time, and so I was more than excited to do that as part of my own personal birthday present. 23 years old right now, and when I did turn 23, I not only did myself a huge favor by revisiting a land of some great childhood memories like Wisconsin Dells, but when I came back, it only got bigger and better from there. A lot of fans whom had followed me from my work on social media, I have in fact sent P.O. Box info to them, as I have opened a P.O. Box down at the local USPS in my area, and people have actually sent me a few things. Some guy even sent me a copy of a pretty rare PS4 title. So I'm really glad that people out there are able to send me some good stuff to my post office box. But in terms of an actual birthday party that was simply hosted together by some of my other friends, whom are local for the record, it's safe to say my 23rd birthday might have been one of the best I've had in years. My 21st birthday was also pretty fun, but considering what had been going on at the time, it probably was just a hit or miss on that part. But hey, age 21 was pretty awesome while it lasted. 22, probably not too much. And 23, absolutely. I not only had myself some nice trips, some nice times spent out in different parts of the country at the time, but I also did, in fact, have myself a nice big party complete with a bunch of great stuff. Nerf, PlayStation, Hot Wheels. I even bought myself a new pillow and a new laptop, of course. So, whether you like it or not, that's pretty much just how my trips at that point in time went. But the rest of the time I spent out in 2022 up until this very point are just even better. Like, take a look at what happened in July, for instance. July 1st through the 11th, I literally drove down all the way to Washington, D.C. No joke. This is another one of those trips that was associated because of my brother. Luke himself literally went out to the state of Maryland, and it just so happens we were very close to the city of Washington, D.C. itself. So when you really think about it, getting to go to Washington, D.C. for the very first time in my life is just monumental. It really overshadows the likes of almost every other possible trip I've ever went on in my entire life. It's even better than going to Walt Disney World. It's even better than heading out to Oregon. It's even better than heading up to Pikes Peak in Colorado. It's even better than getting to go to Carolina near Myrtle Beach. So of course, Washington, D.C. might have been possibly the best trip I've ever been to, period. And of course, there were, in fact, tons of stuff I did there. I made lots of photos and videos worth of stuff in 11 days that I have spent out in that area and even in between. From Menominee Falls to DC, then DC to Falls again. I've definitely made well over 700 photos and videos at the time, which is incredible to say the least. It's pretty much a personal record in terms of photo archives or media archives that consist of photos and videos that have to do with whatever trips I go down to. But then of course, I also planned on doing Six Flags for the first time in a while. That unfortunately didn't go through very well, but I also got to go to Iowa once again. So that's pretty much just what that's about in a nutshell. And I suppose that probably covers everything that you need to know based on trips. In case you're wondering about next year though, it'll pretty much be the same exact thing. But of course, with a few things that'll happen every now and then, another trip to Florida will be expected, a trip to Ohio will be expected again, and possibly the likes of Carolina, and believe it or not, even Las Vegas. So DC was unbelievable, but I could never imagine going to Las Vegas by myself or with other people. And I know for sure that Luke himself will definitely want to go to Vegas for his 21st birthday. I spent my 21st birthday out here with little to nothing at all, especially when the world had changed significantly because of a virus. But we'll just see what happens when Luke's 21st birthday comes and goes. Down there in Sin City itself, we'll see what we can possibly do. Gamble a little bit, drink a little bit, we'll see what happens at any given moment. It might not be worth doing, but there's only so much that I can possibly hold on back to before it's all of a sudden completely gone for good. And with that in mind, that's all I got to say about any of that stuff that associates with trips or anything else that just simply matches up with that sort of activity. I've definitely gone through on road, train, plane, hardly ever on boat. But maybe we'll just see what the future has to offer. So, with that in mind, thank you very much for watching again. And be sure to like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side if you want to see more.